Great. Well, listen, thank you all so much. I'm Danny Kruger, and the Devizes, and its internet, which has lots of places which don't have good enough internet, and lots of people have written to me and said, please, can we fix this? So I've had various conversations with Openreach, with bits of government, with the council, all of which, you know, in a sense, very positive and encouraging. But equally, there's lots of, you know, still some unhappy constituents. So I thought rather than lots of individual and private conversations that I could have on people's behalf, just frankly get in the way, it would be better to have a conversation in public with the people who either are responsible for internet coverage in our area or who potentially have the answers to some of the problems that we're facing. So thank you all very much, those of you who've joined us in person here in Devizes and those watching from home. And if you can get good enough signal to watch from home. What we're going to do is going to hear, well, we've got a very brilliant panel of people who know what they're talking about. We're going to hear from them. First, we're going to hear from people who are, we've got a colleague from government, we've got a colleague from Openreach, and we've got a colleague from the council. I want to hear from them first, and then to open up to questions and comments. If you're watching this remotely, please use the chat function that you've got to type in any questions you've got, and Rebecca will be monitoring those and will shout out the questions on your behalf for us. And we'll just see how that goes. And then in the second half of the meeting, we're looking more specifically at innovative solutions and what we might do to particularly fill in the sort of the gaps in provision in our villages. And we've got some colleagues from companies that do that. So why don't I start by introducing the panel, who've sat in no particular order. But Michael at the end here, Michael Much runs a business that we're hoping is going to have some of the answers for us in the second half of the session. Aylan Darwood. Brilliant. Mark. Okay. Anyway, these guys are both rivals, competitors, and friends who run companies that have potentially some of the answers that we need. Steve is from Openreach. We've got Andrew here from GigaNet, which is another company that is delivering broadband solutions in the area. Ian Blair-Pilling is the cabinet member on Wiltshire Council, responsible for the My Wilts programme and broadband issues. And then remotely, and I hope we might see, and we do, Andrew's there, is the director of the digital bit of DCMS, Andrew, or the broadband rollout, BDUK. Tell us your job title, Andrew.
Yeah, program director for Project Gigabit, which is the Gigabit broadband delivery program being managed by DCMS.
I don't know what bit of the Out Hebrides Andrew's driving from, but it's probably our internet, not his, it's the issue. Okay, so thanks all. We've got an hour and a half. I'm going to ask Andrew if we can hear from him to go first and talk a bit about government policy and where we've got. Just a few minutes, Andrew, you don't need to take long because there are lots of people who will want to jump in with questions. And then I'm going to come to Ian, and then to Ian from Wiltshire Council, and then Steve from.
Can you hear me? I can see you, but I can't hear you. Okay, I'll keep talking.
Yeah, we can hear you, Andrew.
You can hear me. Okay. Right. Well, I hope this is working then. So, Andrew Fields, I'm the program director for what is now called Project Gigabit, the government's program to deliver or ensure coverage of gigabit broadband across the UK. And in short, the targets are to reach or to enable gigabit broadband, which is of speeds of 1,000 megabits per second available, not necessarily taken up, for at least 85% of premises across the UK by 2025, and to ensure near universal coverage as soon as possible thereafter, and certainly by 2030. This is all fairly new, but it's off the back of the previous programme that we've run over the last 10 years to provide superfast broadband coverage to as many premises as possible. We had a target to ensure superfast broadband coverage to 95% of UK premises by the end of 2017, and that figure is now around 97%. I think it's slightly below that in Wiltshire and Devizes. And most of that coverage has been achieved through commercial delivery by Openreach, Virgin Media, and other commercial providers. And then in addition, through projects which have had public funding managed through contracts between government through DCMS and our delivery unit, which is Building Digital UK, and local authorities such as Wiltshire Council. And we supported a number of projects in Wiltshire, initially with Openreach, but more recently there has also been one project with a company called GigaClear, which has supported the additional provision of superfast coverage in areas which were not covered by the market. And by superfast, we define that as being infrastructure capable of being able to deliver speeds of more than 24 megabits per second. That threshold has now been increased to 30, but in essence, that can only be delivered through a fibre-enabled broadband network, but with still the option of the final drop from the street cabinet to premises being on the old copper line. The new programme is now focused on gigabit, which is largely or almost entirely delivered through either fibre to the premises, so fibre running all the way through the telephone network to the doorstep, or through Virgin Media's cable network. Virgin are in the process of upgrading the capability of their network so that by the end of this year, they will be able to offer gigabit speeds to pretty well all of the customers covered by their network. Currently, about 40% of UK premises now have access to gigabit as a result of either fibre coverage or Virgin's cable network. That will increase to 60% by the end of this year, largely as a result of the Virgin speed upgrades. They will have upgraded pretty well all of their network by then. The fibre delivery, so fibre to the premises, is now being taken forward in a big way by Openreach, which I'm sure they'll tell you more about, and also by quite a large number now of other network providers, such as City Fibre, Hyperoptic, GigaClear, and a range of other small to medium providers operating in many different parts of the country. The commercial coverage should reach about 80% of premises by 2025. With the additional support being given by government to extend that coverage, we are confident that will at least reach the 85% target that we've got by 2025. And we'll work hard to get it to near universal coverage as soon as possible thereafter. The ways in which this is now being achieved, firstly, there is the commercial rollout, and the plans for that are becoming increasingly publicly available. The Project Gigabit programme, which we are now implementing, has a number of elements to it. The main ones of those are really the opportunity to use vouchers by small groups of premises or communities to effectively for premises to group together and get access to vouchers which enable them to then subsidise rollout through a commercial provider. Openreach has got a long track record of supporting those sorts of projects, and so have other providers. And then the other main part will be that we will support procurements again, where the government will provide subsidy to a commercial provider to deliver coverage to as many premises as possible within the scope of the available funding to those premises which will not get coverage through any other route. And we published yesterday a quarterly update on our plans for taking this forward, with a proposal for a project in Wiltshire and South Gloucestershire to go into the procurement process for that next year, and that would then lead to contracts being awarded in 2023, and then we would expect a delivery program of a period of about 3 to 4 years to deliver that coverage. So those are the two main elements of the gigabit piece. The other bit, just to fill in, is there is also in place now the universal service obligation. So this was introduced a couple of years ago as a backstop for premises which are not able to access speeds of at least 10 megabits per second, which is regarded now as the minimum really required for functional broadband. It's the USO, or Universal Service Obligation. Under the USO, Openreach has an obligation to provide a quote for connections to premises which can't receive speeds of at least 10, and then to support those connections up to a cost threshold of £3,400 per property. And groups of properties can also group together under that scheme, similar to the voucher scheme. It's entirely up to Openreach what technology they would use, and they might want to talk a bit more about that. But that is another way in which of ensuring at least access to basic broadband speeds, provided premises are under that cost cap. If they're over the cap, there's still the option of taking forward a project, but then the community itself would need to find the additional funding. So there's so where we are now is this very good superfast coverage, but not universal. There's the backstop through the USO, and we're now bringing forward gigabit coverage, as I said, firstly through commercial, then secondly through the opportunity of using vouchers for groups of premises, or through the procurements that will start next year.
Why don't we mute him, Rebecca?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Have you got that sound? Great. Okay, that was agony but informative. Andrew, I hope you can hear us. Thank you very much indeed for all that information. There was a bit of glitching. I mean, just to try and summarise quickly. So by 2025, 80% of the country will be covered commercially. There are these schemes, including the £3,400 per property budget available under the Universal Service Obligation, which can be grouped together, which is useful. But Project Gigabit offers, through the vouchers and now this new procurement, the opportunity to pretty much cover everywhere else. Whether that's going to be sufficient for all of our communities is what we're really here to discuss. So thank you very much, Andrew. I hope we'll be able to ask you some questions in a moment. I'm going to come to Ian now to talk about what Wiltshire Council has been doing.
Thanks, Danny. I was going to focus just on what we've been doing, but because I wasn't quite sure how much BD UK were going to be saying, but I'll leave in the bits about BD UK and voucher scheme and everything. So in that, I'll try and set a scene across it before you start talking to the providers themselves or listening to them. And in quite a sense, I'm the man with a really good news story that you don't want to hear, because by definition, you are the people who have not benefited from that good news story. That's why you're here this evening. But let me set the scene of that as to why and how we've got to where we are at the moment. Since 2013, we've been working in partnership with Openreach, GigaClear, and BD UK to set about to bring super fast fibre broadband to areas of Wiltshire that the commercial providers considered non-viable. So we only kick in where a commercial provider says we're not going to touch it on our own. And I just want to emphasize that super fast means fibre to a cabinet and then copper thereafter. And therein can be people's problems, because how long is their piece of copper in that? At the start of the programme, back in 2013, about 40% of Wiltshire did not have access to superfast broadband. So only 60% even achieved that standard then. So we have invested heavily, and we believe we've been rewarded suitably. As of today's date, the coverage of superfast within Wiltshire, that is greater than 24 megabytes per second, is 96% now. So we've gone from 60 to 96%. And of those, 23% have access to full fibre to the premises. So that's your gigabit capability in that. Wiltshire was one of only 44 authorities that signed up to this in the first instance. So there are quite a number of authorities that weren't even involved in this programme. And so they haven't got as far as we have in this. And we were one of the very first signers up into this. And we were one of the heaviest investors of our money, your money, into this. And this is all about what has been achieved before what you've just been hearing. I talked about that difference between where a commercial company will tread and where they won't tread without further incentive. And that extra bit is called the intervention area. And the Wiltshire Online programme, as we called it, we could only use public money in that area where we could demonstrate that no current or planned deployment of fibre broadband. That's the intervention area. So, and if a premises was not upgraded as part of our programme, that is why you're all here, it isn't because the area was not factored into the plans, it's because we didn't, or because we didn't understand the number of premises there, but it's because the council's strategic decision in this was to deliver that superfast broadband to the greatest number of premises for the budget available. And so the constraint in this was not a particular percentage that had to be hit. It was not it was the amount of money available and how many premises could we therefore include for that. So it's the guys up the long tracks that are by definition not included in that. And that only gets worked through and understood as the designs are developed. And even now, with one of the companies, we are still negotiating with them as to whether this premise can be in or that premise can be in according to the cost of it. So, I'll get back to my script. To achieve this, the build plan was designed is based not just on one factor, but a combination of many factors. And that is including and not limited to the value for money, the existing infrastructure, the speeds already received, the number of premises in the area, and the distance of premises away from the existing infrastructure. We did think right at the beginning of this about using a different set of principles, such as prioritizing specific communities or prioritizing the most rural communities in this. But if we'd done that, we would have had a less efficient rollout. We would have hit fewer premises for the money available. So we didn't use that solution. So as where we are at the moment, the current situation is that we have been operating 4 contracts in partnership with BD UK. All but one of those contracts is now concluded. We're winding up, the third has a few months still to go. The total contract value in this has been 39 million. Wiltshire Council put in 15.5 million into that. BD UK 8.2, and the missing millions come from the companies themselves. Bear in mind what I said about this is the amount of money that they might have put in had this been commercially viable. We have to put in more money to make it viable for them to do it. And that's our 15.5 and BD UK's 8.5, 8.2. So the number of premises upgraded to fibre in this time has been 101,000, of which 82,000 are superfast or greater. There's 20,000 missing there, and that is because although they've got fibre to a cabinet and copper, they're still probably not hitting that 24 megabytes and therefore can't be classed as superfast in that. The kind of big future is what BD UK was talking about there, and that's Boris has promised to deliver gigabit capability to all within the 5 years. We only saw yesterday what the press release was on that and where we might be in that. We've been working with BD UK to help them get an understanding of what the outstanding requirement is in our area and validating the data sets, etc. Our understanding at the moment is that we will be what they call bundled. We had separate bundles within Wiltshire before, and that is offered then to the commercial world. Do you want to bid to deliver this particular bundle? We are being bundled with South Gloucestershire and Swindon. So that's one contract which we understand now is due to be put out in the middle of next year and start delivering in the middle at a point in 2023. And I think you heard for 3 to 4 years from there. Yeah. So I know you're going to hear a good deal more from these guys about what they can do, but from our point of view, Wiltshire Council is kind of poised to work with BD UK, work with whoever wins that contract to do all of that. We at the moment within our website have signposted and can point you at the information as to how to go about the voucher scheme or the universal service obligation, but neither of those things are we directly involved in. That's the bit that I want to emphasize here. So I think I've got a bit more to say about the constraints on that and the factors if you want to hear them later, but it's probably better to hand over at this stage. Yeah.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. They're very helpful indeed. They're all that. Okay. Right, Steve. Not always the most popular person there. Well, for Openreach. Thank you very much indeed for coming. And why don't you introduce yourself and explain about what you're doing?
Yes, we'll do. I think I've got some slides that can just they'll come up in a sec. So my name's Steve Harris. I'm a partnership manager for Openreach. So primarily my role has been to manage and oversee contracts that we're delivering alongside local authorities, one of which in my area is Wiltshire, but also the wider stakeholder engagement. And what I'll do just very briefly is just talk you through in terms of Openreach's involvement in Wiltshire and in the Devizes constituency. So really following on from what Ian just said, we have developed quite a long-standing relationship with Wiltshire Council. And when the slides come up, it just gives you a visual representation really of what Ian's just been talking through. The first 2 contracts across Wiltshire have enabled over 76,000 premises. And again, like I said, it will give you a plot, so you'll see that coverage. It does go right across throughout wider Wiltshire. Again, as Ian said, 24 meg speeds. Out of those, there were over 18,000 premises across 1,500 postcodes across the Devizes constituency. We've then had the third contract that Ian mentioned, so that's called phase 3. And that's just going through the closure process. That's delivered a further 1,500 premises, with around half of those again in the Devizes constituency. And as Ian said, that marks Openreach's the end of Openreach's involvement in the current BD UK programmes in Wiltshire, with Project Gigabit obviously on the horizon. So like Ian said, same message from me. I realise obviously the people in this room won't necessarily be the people who have benefited from those schemes, but there has been great progress. What I would say is that some of this work has only just recently completed. We're just going through the closure, so it is worth just double checking and making sure that actually you can or cannot receive an upgraded service. Obviously, you will have your existing service. We have a postcode checker on our Openreach website. You can also go to somewhere like Ofcom, and it will and we also have an opportunity to register your details on our website, so you'll be automatically notified if you are upgraded. But it is worth just doing that because there have been recent developments in the area. I think obviously going through COVID, you know, that's highlighted the ultimate demand and need for higher broadband speeds across the area. And clearly there is still a lot to do in the Devizes area, which is still lagging behind the rest of Wiltshire in terms of FTTP coverage. So in terms of what Openreach is doing right now, and this, sorry, slide up now. This second slide just gives you details that I'll come on to in a second, which is around our commercial exchanges. So our commitment nationally is to deliver fibre to the premise technology to 25 million homes and businesses by 2026. So that is also trying to ensure that the hardest to reach homes and businesses are not left behind during this rollout. Our Fibre First commercial programme has a planned commitment to deliver 6.2 million FTTP premises in rural market, town and villages by 2026. So, you know, it's a significant part of our commercial plan now is to focus on the rural areas. And we are a full fibre business now. That is our sole focus. So some of the previous contract delivery, as Ian said, will have included fibre to the cabinet. So as Ian said, you know, depending on where you are in relation to that cabinet, that will potentially impact your speeds. We are now fully focused on full fibre going forwards. So that will ensure those gigabit speeds are there. In Wiltshire as a whole, following our latest announcement in June, 8 exchanges have now been announced as part of our Cities, Towns and Boroughs programme, and there are 19 rural build exchanges. And of those, we have 5 exchanges within the Devizes constituency. So this slide here plots all of those announcements, and I think the previous slide gives just a shaded area to again give you an indication of where premises will be picked up. It's quite hard to see on.
What's this such a big gap down south east side? Have you got any idea?
I think this would have.
Yes.
Well, no, but to the side, I mean, there's a lot of villages and towns down.
This one here purely picks out the Devizes exchanges that we're focused on, but you can access all of this on our website. So you can drill down into more information, and that lists the 5 unique exchanges within Devizes. So it gives the locations there. So if you can't see the screen, that's Oldbourne, Devizes, Lamington, Marlborough, and Pewsey. So obviously those are the exchange areas. At this stage, you know, this is a very recent announcement. I can't give you, you know, which premises are going to be picked up. I can't give you time frames. This is a 5-year build programme. There'll be processes so that, you know, these exchanges will be surveyed. Our commitment is, or our ambition, better word to say, is to get to at least 75% coverage in each exchange. I would say in other areas, so far we've been able to build more nut spots than we've anticipated. But everything is obviously subject to survey. This is a commercial build programme, but we will go as far as we can commercially.
So because you've got some dates out there. I mean, it is possible that 1 or 2 of those won't be built for 4 years because you've got until 2000.
The programme extends out to, yes.
So
yes.
we don't know when they're going to be built.
No, there'll be, as I say, you can register for updates on our website. So as soon as you know your relevant area comes into focus, there'll be warnings ahead of time. But we will only make those announcements closer to the time that we will actually go into build for those areas. Because as I say, it is a commercial programme. So
plan, isn't it? Because you're just waiting for something to happen.
So
it might be 4 years.
Let's
let them finish. Then we'll come questions.
that's one element. That's one element of it. But I mean, the added bonus of our increased commercial plans is obviously that enables government to put their subsidy into areas that aren't covered and where it's needed most. And it is also important just to emphasise, you know, that when it comes to that responsibility, it's not just Openreach. We are a commercial venture, and other providers can and will need to play their part in this too. I guess the final part, if you can skip 2 slides now.
There's a slight delay on the slide.
Okay.
They'll come up in a second.
So that's one point of the work that we're doing in terms of our commercial programme. We do also work with local communities through our community fibre partnerships. And I think that was mentioned in the earlier presentation in terms of the gigabit voucher scheme that the government offers to subsidise those programmes. So we do work alongside that. We put a joint funding arrangement in place. That means we can obviously contribute some of the costs ourselves as well, and then the community will fund the difference. Obviously, the viability of that is going to vary from area to area, depending on the costs involved and what is involved, but we will obviously make every attempt we can to come up with a viable solution if it's possible to do so and include as many premises as possible to be captured in that solution. And we'll advise on any grants that you might be entitled towards. Even if your area already has fibre broadband, so as long as it's currently under 100 megabytes, I realise, so even if you've already benefited, or some premises have benefited from a fibre to the cabinet solution, they're still eligible for this funding. So that's important to distinguish that, because it can then include further premises that you might not think would be entitled to join in. We've got, there we go, we've got a total of 31 community funded partnerships that are ongoing or live in this constituency. So 8 are already live, that's over 500 premises that have benefited from the scheme. There's 1 that's currently in build, there are 3 at final offer, and there are 19 communities that have registered interest and are progressing through the pipeline. Again, you can see the coverage across the constituency is fairly broad. So I would encourage, I know some of you have probably already been in contact with our team, but I would encourage you to engage with our rural engagement team to explore what the opportunities are. Sometimes the more we build, the more we can lower the cost, but there are no guarantees. And if it's beyond the threshold of vouchers, and it's not obviously within our commercial programme, then another solution is required. And that is a sector and a government national issue. I would just also just point out, in terms of the universal service obligation, it is important to point out that the responsibility for that lies with BT rather than Openreach. So Openreach is a separate company. We did that in 2018, so it became a legally separate company from BT. And we have our own board and strategy because we deal with obviously BT, but other providers as well. Again, there is information on that scheme on the BT website. And yes, if you do have a download speed of less than 10 megabytes, then you can potentially look into that scheme. But again, it will depend on the costs involved in terms of where that obligation kicks in. But it's worth looking into alongside other options.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. That was very, very helpful. Great. Okay, let's go to questions now to any of these gents. And Rebecca, if you've got any coming in on the chat, let us know. Trevor, I want to come to you. I want to give you a proper time to speak. And if you want to challenge these guys now, that's great. I'm going to give you a chance to.
Because all of the conversation so far have been about download speeds. We get unreliable download speeds, but good enough. The problem is to do something like a Zoom call or send an email, you also need upload speeds. I currently manage on my Openreach 128 kilobits, whereas I can get some days 15 megabits down. I can only get 128 kilobits up. And of course, when it rains. So is there any plans, is there any way that the network could adjust that? I'd be happier with 10 megabits down and 6 megabits up. For me, it would be a lot more useful.
Steve,
well, I mean, the answer into the longer term from an Openreach perspective is why we've shifted our focus to a full fibre bill, because that will also enable your upload speeds. I guess the relevance in referring to the download speeds, particularly from a contract point of view, is that was the commitment in terms of what would be provided. But as you say, particularly for small businesses, those upload speeds are crucial, and that is why full fibre is the future.
But in the absence of that, and until that happens, is it possible to switch the ratio, or does that require, is that government policy to set the terms that we've got to deliver that download speed? How easy would it be to do what Trevor's asking?
From a technical point of view, I'm not probably not the best person to answer. I can take that away and find out.
Can I speak as an IT?
Yeah,
you can tweak the routers. You can tweak the channels you're using.
Okay, but it's
you can do a lot to split.
Okay.
There's multiple channels you can use, things like that.
Yeah,
you can twist your performance a lot.
Your point of contact though would be with your provider.
Yeah.
Rather
Okay.
I was going to say, so ADSL technology, which is the underlying technology that most FTTC runs on, is asynchronous. So unfortunately, the technology is designed, but the download is not the same as the upload. And when you're dealing in slower speeds, unfortunately, the upload speed is then really hit. And it's impossible with ADSL technology.
So with VDSL, you can actually tweak it quite a lot.
all right. I'm going to manage the conversation. Hold on a second. One person at a time. Can I just check, Rebecca, if anyone's complaining about not being able to hear, can you tell me? But I assume that everyone who's talking remotely, hearing from us remotely is okay?
One person said they can't hear, but I'm just asking someone else who's watching to check.
Okay, so maybe in the room, if you'd speak a bit louder, that'd be great. Gentleman at the back.
Good evening. I represent a lot of old people in our village, and so I asked a young person in his 40s, what was the question I should ask them? I live in Wedhampton, and we have a telephone exchange box, so I'm told, at the top of the village, and it has fibre optic connections, but the exchange is in Church. And throughout the village, we only have copper wiring, so we're always going to be limited to slow speeds. And there's been breaks in the wire recently. How can we get higher speeds, or will it work for us in the future?
Steve, if you've got an answer to that, let us know. But I think that might be addressed by the next part of it. But that is, in a sense, the great question.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know the specific circumstances of my head, but again, if there are concerns, your first point of contact is with your service provider. And then if it's a longer term issue in terms of whether you'd like to see increased speeds, then it's worth, as I say, going through those steps in terms of checking whether you're in an upgrade
We
program.
live 500 yards from the box,
Right.
but apparently the exchange is in the next village, in Church.
Right.
But there've been breaks in the wire, according to this man, the 40-year-old, and we don't get very good speeds.
Okay, what we can do is, and I should have made this point at the beginning, Openreach have very kindly agreed to look into any specific issues that are raised tonight that aren't already with them. And even if they are, they're going to look at them again for us. So whether you watch from home or here today, you just need to give us the postcodes and the addresses, and Openreach will kindly look into this. Okay, I'm going to come, this gentleman, then in the second row, and then you, sir, and then Aisha. I will get it there eventually. Should have written it down. You've got some sponsors to help.
Thank you. First of all, great thank you to both Openreach and the council for the progress you've made. And you can clearly see the progress because your engineers are building boxes and so on. The big question I have is, and this is probably where all of us are hurting massively, is how can I get an improvement between your FTT box, which your Openreach website tells me I actually have access to superfast, and that damn copper line that comes to my house. And what is the process for us to either apply for to get that cable changed? Because I've had probably about, and I'm not exaggerating, 15 to 20 Openreach engineers come to my house, investigate what's there, and they say you cannot get more out of your copper than there is. Now, my record speed is about 6 to 7 megabits. And I celebrate that because my average is probably just over the BT guaranteed limit of 2.5. I get 2.5. So is there a way we can find out how the box infrastructure in Wiltshire, Ian, I think, and you have mentioned, has been greatly improved, but how does the last mile, and actually in my case it's 2 kilometers and copper doesn't do that, improve, or what is the process we have to apply to get fiber to the premises? Thank you.
Thank you. Hold that thought. In the next row, yes.
Yeah, I live probably as far east in Wiltshire as you can possibly get. The Hampshire border's 1/4 of a mile down the road. I know for a fact that in the road outside my house there is a fibre, because 2 years ago one of your subcontractors pulling the fibre through pulled all our copper wires apart, and we didn't have any phones for 3 weeks. But so there is a fibre line there. The exchange is in Oxenwood, which is about 3/4 of a mile away, maybe half a mile, a bit more. And I know that coming from that exchange is a fibre that comes down as far as Church Farm, which is again a few hundred yards up the road from me, but it doesn't go any further. It also goes to Wexcombe and Martin, which are long lines. You talked about not getting up the long tracks. Well, Wexcombe is up a long track, and yet they got it. And when I talk to the Openreach guys that come, they say, oh yeah, well, they've got it, but we're not coming to you. So here we are. We know there is a junction point at Church Farm, which is a few hundred yards away, and I know there is a line in the road outside my house, how much does it cost to put a junction point in there's a manhole cover there, and a telegraph post? How much does it cost to put a junction on a fibre and then show it up there? And we've got about 8 houses there, of which 4 people work from home.
Yeah. Okay.
It just doesn't seem.
Steve's going to answer that after this gentleman, and I'll come to you as well.
Right, my argument is that we have a brand new, well, 2.5 years ago, they put up a fibre overhead fibre cable and right past our roads. And they installed junction boxes, as the engineers told us, and every time they come out to fix our crappy broadband, they tell us, why aren't we connected to these super fast ones? They phone up BT because they say we can do it when we're out here, and BT say it doesn't exist. We phone up Openreach, they say it doesn't exist. I've sent them pictures, pictures on my phone I can show you. Then they say they'll do a survey, they've done a survey, they say, no, that's a junction, that's where they've joined the cable. And I said, no, there's 2. There's the Durex shaped one, which is where you join the cable. The one above is where the engineers get tapped into it. Then they say, no, it's a private contractor that's taking this over. It's got Openreach is out all the time, doing things to it, and repairing it, and installing it, and doing updates to it, so we can't connect to it. But it's funny, because outside every house, there is the box to connect the cable into it, but they tell us we can't. And then on the universal scheme, I got a letter saying I could apply for it, filled it all out, had the survey done, said the houses round about can do it, and I was told, no, they can't now, because you're in a bubble of your own. And I said, why am I in a bubble? We can't tell you. That would breach confidentiality. I said, but I'm a farm that has 2 farm cottages. So would the 2 farm cottages not be in my bubble?
No. All right, 1 second. Steve, I know you want you to come in, but I want to have a hand first, and then this gentleman, and then I'm going to come to you, and then we're going to get some questions from people who are watching remotely. So,
thank you, Danny, for getting my name right. Ahan Darwood, Greengrass Broadband. That's me. And this is Mark Much, not Michael Much, Mark Much from F1 IT. We are here at Danny's kind invitation to, in my case, to repeat what I did about 3 years ago with Claire Perry in the seat, to explain what our businesses do, which is to provide broadband to the places that Openreach and GigaClear are struggling at the moment to reach, or are in build plans, but as we've just heard, several years away. People like you actually need broadband now. And whether you get a gigabit speed in 5 years, which ultimately will be the best thing, and Openreach are doing a good job of spreading it out, but we've heard all the limitations and the constraints and how long it's going to take. Meanwhile, people are saying things to us like, I want it now, I want anything. I want more than, you mentioned the upload speed in kilobytes, not megabits. Yeah, kilobits, I always get that wrong, even though I'm in the industry. Mark and I are competitive businesses, but we work together. We do exactly the same thing, and we use, Mark built a Christmas tree this afternoon of these things called aerials.
Ahan, I'm very sorry, I really want to hear from you guys. That's the second half of the session, which is about future solutions, which is why I want to come to you guys in a second. I just thought you might have a...
Well, the answer is...
I hear that, but while I've got Steve in the hot seat, I'm just going to let everyone take it.
Well, I'll stop that bit, and you've heard it already.
Well, we will come back to you guys.
So I can answer the Oxenwood question. Martin, Wexcombe and Oxenwood did a community fibre scheme where they then used the gigabit voucher scheme to deploy fibre. And the outlying villages, Tidcombe, for example, wasn't included. There were lots of other kind of more remote areas that weren't included within that scheme. And that was partly because these community voucher schemes have to be driven by a champion and someone within the community that's prepared to put a lot of effort and time into basically get the numbers and drive it forward.
Yeah, okay. That is a big part of the answer.
The thing about fibre is that you're going to have your sense there's 2 types of fibre that run down the street. So you'll get an engineer saying, I ran a fibre down, but that might be part of what's called a leased line or an Ethernet network. It's not part of the FTTP network. and you need to have the right lit nodes. If you've also got a node, which is the ball line on a post, that might not have the right type of fibre connectivity going through it. So even though you think that you've got fibre there, it's an Ethernet connection, not an FTTP connection, which is massively confusing.
And annoying. But that's very, very good to hear that. Right.
And that lease line is approximately £250 a month, and you might get enough to club together to pay for it and share it.
Okay, so let's think about innovations like that in a minute. Poor old Steve needs to respond to these gentlemen, and then I'm going to come to you next as well.
So, I think first of all, as Danny said previously, if there is a specific issue or a situation that's been ongoing, we can look into that. I won't be able to give you an answer now, but as Danny said, they're happy to sort of compile those, and if we haven't already provided a response, and then we've had some that have been responded to already, we can do so. Again, we are just one provider, but if you wanted to explore an option with Openreach, then by going through our community fibre partnership process, that would provide what the potential option would be to provide full fibre in your area, and then that would provide the costings, and they will design the solution. So in terms of, as you just pointed out, there may be certain ideas about what is or isn't involved in a particular area. That will be the definitive process to actually work that through and come up with a costed plan. And again, if you're not in another intervention program already, or you're not willing to wait to see how Project Gigabit unfolds, whether you're included in that or whether you're included in our commercial plans or any other commercial plans, that would be your option with Openreach to explore a potential upgrade.
Steve, thank you. So,
thank you. I've recently moved to West Overton, and I apologise to some of you because I get much better broadband than some of you do, but I still think it's poor, particularly with upload speed, and I work from home. That's how I got to move here. And it seems to me that the strategy is a bit wrong because the cabinet is 700 metres away from where I am, probably about 500 metres from the centre of the village on the main road. If another cabinet was taken into the village, then everyone could have quite decent internet. Don't need fibre to the premises. I'm not particularly interested in that, but get a better upload speed. The download speed's doable, but the upload speed I find for my work can be problematic, particularly just living in a household with children and other people working from home. And it seems to me that you talk about competition, but in the village there's no competition. Everything comes in by Openreach, and with no choice, you can speak to Vodafone, you can speak to BT, you get no answers essentially because they're all selling your service. And I think basically the strategy used to be putting more green cabinets in. That was scrapped for fibre to premises, and I think it seems to me if you went a bit further with the fibre, with the cabinets moving closer to people, you could complete the fibre to premises later on, and that would work and probably get a lot of these people very happy much quicker.
Okay. I know that other people want to comment in the room, but Rebecca, do you just want to just chuck some questions that are coming in on the chat?
Yes, there's one for you, but one for Steve, and then one for Andrew, which probably do last because we sound. I'll just start with a question for Steve. This is from Dominic Munns.
Speak up.
He says, our local community wishes to form a task force in order to group together local residents and their vouchers with a view to approaching Openreach en masse for a targeted fibre to the premises installation. Does this task force need to exist as a formal entity, such as a limited company, a parish council, or a registered charity, or can it simply be an informal community group?
So with our community fibre partnerships, the answer is it depends. So we do have two potential pathways now with our community fibre partnerships. One is the traditional approach is that yes, you would require a legal entity. However, there are situations now where when we model what the potential delivery would look like, if we consider it financially viable to do so, there is potentially a route through there that they wouldn't have to do that. But basically, they should apply as a group, go through the process, and then they will be guided through that.
They're in the Lovington where he is, which is where you've got one of your stations there. one of these exchanges, yeah. So I don't know if that makes it more or less.
It will just depend, yeah, I mean, that won't determine necessarily the legal entity, it will depend on the number of premises. I mean, there was a point made earlier about community fibre partnerships, and we will always try and maximise the coverage that community, so somebody from the community may come and say, I want me and my 10 neighbours to be upgraded. We will always try and maximise that as far as possible. And as I say, if it then hits that threshold, we can go into what we call a demand-led scheme where a legal entity isn't required, but they will be guided through that.
Fantastic. Okay, there's one more question, and then I'm going to hear from our entrepreneurs, and then we can carry on with Q&A.
Yeah, so this is a question for Andrew Field. It says, if Wiltshire and South Gloucestershire are being included in the procurement programme, does that mean if we do nothing, our service will be improved within a set timescale?
Right.
Yeah, so the answer to that is that the procurement process will cover all premises that are not covered by any other scheme, subject to, again, the whole programme being subject to a cost limit. So very, very expensive premises will potentially still not be covered through the scheme, but the intention is that we will get to almost all premises through the procurement approach if they are not already in scope for commercial rollout or through coverage through a voucher scheme or some other form of intervention.
No, I was just waiting.
Yes, Swindon's not in the same open project. Yeah. Yeah.
Just one more point on the fibre to the cabinet issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, there has, until fairly recently, in the Bees UK funded contracts, we were still delivering fibre to the cabinet upgrades as well. But I think as a company and looking forward, full fibre is the future in terms of ultra reliability, in terms of speeds, to help Wiltshire communities for the next 100 years. This is the future. And then, there's plenty of people who can receive good service off copper, and it will still continue to provide good services for years to come. But the future in terms of demand and what is going to be required in the future is full fibre. Sorry?
What about the copper upgrade? It's great that we've got the boxes in the villages now, but if you are too far away, and I think one gentleman said 700 meters, I'm 2 Ks away.
And that highlights one of the issues with the technology, which is why. So if you were to approach Openreach, and again, we are providing you are able to approach other providers as well. But if you were to approach Openreach, we would look at what it would take to provide a full fibre solution in your local community, because that is what's going to be required over the next period of time.
Even on the voucher scheme, I was told 2 years ago for 8 properties, £23,000. They are working class neighbours and they cannot afford that. Last year, Wiltshire Online assured me that we were going to get a full service FTTP, not FTTC. The funding wasn't available when there was a cock up in the design, and consequently, on a 20-pair line that breaks down at 2.4 kilometres, we're without a service, let alone a Wi-Fi calling service, because we can't even depend on the Openreach copper wires that serve me at that distance. So, to agree with the gentleman in red, I'm sorry, Danny, with the greatest respect, calling this together with all the entrepreneurs and so on, the people in this room, like me, are dissatisfied with what we have today. We can't even work. I can't get a mobile signal without a landline, and my landline isn't capable of delivering a suitable service at anything better than 8 megabits.
Got it. So thank you. Let's see if any of these.
And I was here when Claire Perry had that same discussion, and I hooked into her, and it's no different today.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously different for a lot of people, just not enough. We have not reached the full community yet, and that's what today is trying to move us forward on. These other gents are going to see if they've got the answer for you. Do you need to?
I'm just going to make one point there, which was that if you looked at community fibre partnership scheme, did you say that was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
But one of the points is obviously the more full fibre that is being rolled out and is delivered can potentially lower some of those costs.
So we've already got FTTP to everything, therefore, and a 200 pair copper line came in at the same time when Paul Coles delivered it 5 years ago. But it's still not stretching to those few who depend on a mobile signal or an internet that works reliably and consistently. And it doesn't. When the wind blows, the rain comes, each of one of the houses goes offline and loses not only its internet, but its telephony.
Well, that is probably the answer. That is better infrastructure for mobile, isn't it? Which is another big challenge. Well, that's a possibility that we're thinking about. And Trevor's going to talk to that in a second. Okay, I want to move on, if that's all right. As we said, please do, if there are specific issues with Openreach, we will make sure that they give a decent response. Trevor, you should be up here, if that's all right. Do you mind coming up? I want to hear from you first, then Aham can carry on with his pitch, and also Mark, if that's okay, you guys talk together, or however order you want to do. And then Andrew as well. Okay. Yeah, when it comes through here. Thanks, Steve. We've got about half an hour, so let's be brisk. Trevor, over to you.
Okay, so my problem is the same as almost everybody's problem in the room, including yours and everybody else, in that there is fibre to the cabinet in the next village. I'm a mile from that, and I cannot get any kind of decent download or upload speed. And even more importantly than that, cannot get reliability. So as a couple of people said, when it rains, when the wind blows, and now recently when it's been incredibly hot, the Openreach copper wire that comes from that cabinet fails in some way. So we've had probably 15 visits from Openreach engineers over the last 18 months, 2 years. They come round, they play a little bit, they change the box and the word comes into the house. And for the brief second that they're there, it works, and then we go away. So it doesn't work reliably. We still got it, but in order to work from home, in order to run the business at home, we have a half decent 4G signal. So with a BlackBerry in the window, I could run my laptop with a BlackBerry. So what I did was I bought an external 4G antenna, which initially was literally running in the office window. I literally had it screwed to a broom handle in the office window so I could steer it and find the right local antenna. And then from there, I got a couple of different 4G hubs, because I found some 4G hubs were better than others. Like some mobile phones get a better signal than others do, so do the hubs. So after a bit of tinkering around, and probably I've spent about £500 on different bits and pieces, I now got a solution with the antenna where I can get realistically 20 megabits down reliably and 6 megabits up reliably. So I can actually operate quite effectively from there. From there, I've distributed around the house with Ethernet and different Wi-Fi hubs and all the other things. But the house is now running basically on 4G. Now I'm reasonably lucky, as the chap here we talked earlier, he can't even get a 4G signal, so we need another solution for that. But I think there might be a short-term fix for a lot of people where if there was a service where somebody could come in and do what I did by hand, right? I don't really like I don't really want to do that. Exactly. And more importantly, as I said to Danny a few weeks or months back, that if there's a voucher scheme of £1,500 or £3,000 for installing fibre, could we transition that to also bring in a guy that knows what he's doing to sort it all out, can go away and it's working, right? So is there other things?
To answer the last part of that question, DCMS used to offer a voucher scheme, but they pulled it in favour of full fibre.
Right.
So there used to be a part of the gigabit voucher scheme. There was a voucher that enabled us to deploy any of these technologies to the end user.
So we've been speaking to Andrew, and I spoke earlier, and he made that point that used to be the arrangement, and there is the opportunity now for lobby for a resumption of that, and with this new voucher scheme to make sure that that can be used for satellite or mobile or other, and getting the infrastructure in place, because that's what's needed. It's marvelous, isn't it?
Because I think professionally, I could probably get a lot better services.
So there are lots of solutions out there. Fibre's a good solution, but it's going to take time to deploy. And I love connectivity of broadband. It doesn't matter which method it comes in. There are different.
Trevor, do you want to make the other points? Because I want to hear
I think that's principally the point I was making. There might be other solutions out there, and
Yeah, I would like to get it.
You guys take it away.
So I can.
No, stay, further,
I don't mind, I mean, yeah, tell me, so sell it to me.
I could be right.
I specialise, we specialise in getting broadband to places that can't get it through the traditional methods. Now, we have 4 or 5 different ways of doing that. Our core method is by using our what's called fixed wireless network to deliver bandwidth from a high bandwidth area to a low bandwidth area. So where Martin and Wexcombe had their fibre deployed, Tidcombe was left out. I've now got a 1 gig connection beamed up to Tidcombe and distributed it to the houses in Tidcombe. And I then have the ability to send that on to Wexcombe, to further afield, and
Possibly, please.
most probably. So I've got various radio masts that we've built and has the ability to overcome that last mile solution. Now, it's an amazing technology, but it has its limitations and it has its capacities. It's brilliant for rural, mega rural properties, hamlets of houses, and probably villages up to a certain size. But the beauty of this is the speed of the deployment into those rural places. Literally, the time it took me to put this mast here, I could be beaming it to wherever I need to get it.
And how do you distribute the mass to a number of different places?
So we use various what's called backhaul antenna. So this one here has the capabilities of sending a 1 gig connection up to 10 kilometers.
Right.
And once that's there, we then use sector aerials. So these would be placed maybe on a host house, in the village or a farm. And then the smaller area at the top could talk to that aerial at speeds of 200 or 300 megabits per second.
Right. What's it cost?
Yeah.
What's it cost?
Yeah, I've got one of those. Like, could our village buy one and put it up tomorrow?
Well, you would need, can I answer that?
Yeah.
Can I tell a story? You were here 3 years ago with Claire Perry, you said. I was here and I told them, effectively, Mark has just explained, that you can take good broadband connections and beam it with these things to the poor broadband connection area. Somebody in the audience was from a village called Stockley, which is outside Hull. And they approached me afterwards and said, we need you to do something. What can you do? I said, I don't know. We swapped phone numbers and I went down to meet them, and her and her husband drove me around to the village and said, this is Stockley. We have appalling broadband. It's 1, 2, 3 meg, but it breaks down. Rain affects it. Things go wrong, all of the other things. But up in Headington over there, they've got decent broadband. So I got hold of my supplier who approached Openreach and confirmed that we could get an 80 meg connection into the village hall in Headington. That was it, game on. When I said that, she then said, right, I'm going to newsletter, I'm going to leaflet drop everybody in the village, and could you come along on early to mid-December to the village hall on a Sunday for an hour, and we'll just have an open event. About 25, 30 people turned up, and I explained that with this technology, I can beam decent broadband from Headington to their village. Everybody said, when can you do it? How much does it cost? So we went through the details, and that's a question you've just asked. Ultimately, and I'm not dodging that one, by the way, but ultimately, at the time, DCMS had their scheme, which allowed people to apply for a grant of 350 quid per household. So I was able to get everybody to apply for that. Then I went to my supplier, who went to Openreach. Sorry, you're Openreach. Sorry, apologies. So I went to Openreach. Openreach put in a line. I got in an 80 download, 20 meg upload line. And then over the period of about 2 months or so, we went round and put little aerials. We put the big aerials up to distribute out. And then we went and connected houses with mainly those, and occasionally that one around there, which is a bit more powerful. Within 2.5 months of the village hall meeting, 2.5, maybe 3 months if I'm honest, of the village hall meeting, about 40 people had 45 meg download and 10 or 15 upload, I should have forgotten. So Mark said that the beauty of this technology, and he's absolutely right, is the speed with which we can deploy. We need Openreach, we need to find a starting point that Openreach can put in decent connections, or already has it, The moment we've got that, we need to find a building, could be somebody's house, could be a village hall.
Church steeple.
Absolutely. I mean, the Diocese of Salisbury are actively encouraging. It's quite a paperwork palaver to get what's called a faculty, which the planning commission to use the church. Yeah, you've heard of that.
Petrol station.
A petrol station, anything.
Low cabinet is next to a petrol station.
Well, if there is a high enough point to go from A to B without oak trees, you do need line of sight.
You do need line of sight.
Yeah, but what you do is you dance around the problem. So you go from, here's our main fibre, possibly decent copper, and we have to go from there, but the client is over there, but there's the glasses in the way. Sorry, the glass is in the way. So what you do is you put in another aerial there, you go there, at somebody's house.
Yeah.
If that aerial is in place, in the line of sight to the house, you reckon what, a house connection, hour and a half and you're up?
So there are 350 quid per house for how many houses?
Sorry, that was 350, that was a DCMS grant,
Did they have to top it up?
but that is no longer in existence. DCMS have closed
No,
down.
but did they? We're just trying to work out what the cost was.
No, I sucked up the rest of the bill. Because we had to build the infrastructure and sort of somebody had to pay for it.
So what's the rough cost of it?
I charge everybody 40 quid a month. That may not be the cheapest broadband in the country. However, you get me. And when I'm not in a meeting like this is your call centre.
But that was 40 houses. If
Sorry?
it was just one house that didn't get it, it's not going to cost the same amount of money.
No, one house, you would then probably look at the LTE solution, the cellular.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about a group of houses, and then I started out,
I think 40 quid a month for how many houses?
it's 40 quid a month per house. That's a subscription.
Yeah, but there was a minimum number of houses.
I would say to make it viable, 10, 8. It's difficult to tell. I mean, I've got one network running on about 10 houses, and
So it's 400 pounds a month. Your actual costs are, if it was one house on its own, it would be something like 400 quid a month.
it would be no. It would be very difficult. If it's one, because you've got to think, if it was just your house wherever you live,
Yeah.
and we have got line of sight to, obviously, just mentioned the petrol station.
Yeah.
Or commercially, it would be quite expensive for us to do it and then for you to pay for it. So what we try and do is say, well, you must have neighbours. You've got to have some neighbours somewhere within a mile or so. I mean, a lot of our solutions are to the farmers down the 2 mile farm track who've got absolutely nothing. Well, they've got 1 meg, 2 megs breaks down, and we're delivering, in some of my cases, in my network, I mean, it's different, but up to 95 meg, and that's only because we capped them at 95 meg downloads and 20 uploads. So this is a farm or a house in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Also, you know, I have in my village, I have Openreach or BT all over the place now, because when my business started, I was doing exactly what I'm doing to my local village. I've lost one customer, with all due respect, I've lost one, not you. Places again. I've lost 2 customers to BT because they were very, very price sensitive. Everybody else escaped me on the basis that they know that it's personal service, it's a local business, there's some holding, and they can get hold of Mark or they can get hold of me pretty damn instantly.
Do you get latency issues that you get with satellite?
Do you know about latency?
Not well.
Okay.
Enough to ask the question.
One of my clients actually this morning said to me, I'm having problems, I'm not sure what it is. I happen to know that he's got a dodgy Wi-Fi set up in his own home because he did it himself. He said, can you check? So I actually did a speed test, and the latency, which is fairly standard across my network, is 22 milliseconds.
So you could do gaming and live,
Absolutely.
and also video conferencing.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
where it gets.
Well, I mean, at the beginning of lockdown, we were just absolutely flat out installing, because people saw lockdown coming, and then, you know, I basically classed myself as an essential worker and just carried on.
I think after this, we'll talk, I'd like to talk to you about
That's what this is
sorting out the real price, right? Because I'm a bit confused on how much this is really costing. Is it £40 a month?
That's the subscription.
What's the cost? Give me one of those.
All right.
Yeah.
It cost my daughter £1,000 to have such a system installed on the side estate.
Yeah.
Over near Hungerford. I paid for a fibre to the cabinet charge already, and like this gentleman here, we're happy, and that gentleman, we're happy with copper delivery. within technology at 1,500 meters maximum, they reckon, and at 2,400 meters, at 2,000 meters, and so on. I'm not going to pay you £40 a month with respect. I'd love it if somebody said, we will provide it, we will put it in, and that is what. However, sorry, just Mark, to jump in. Yeah. In the middle of the military training area, the Everly estate, SPTA, Lower Everly sits in a little bowl like that. You will not get your system to me because there, amongst 8 others or 7 other properties, is nobody who's going to club together and pay you or any other firm to deliver it, because you will not get the wayleaves and the permissions necessary to bring that service into my valley.
Obviously, I don't know your valley, so I don't know, but we do get into some pretty amazing places.
Yeah, you won't. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean,
why should I pay Openreach or BT for a service that they don't deliver to me?
Yeah, but you wouldn't need to pay Openreach unless you wanted to retain your phone line.
Well, that's the thing.
But then you don't need
because everything else for a mobile signal at the moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, that you'd probably say I could therefore have a Wi-Fi calling equivalent because I'd be getting it over a broadband link rather than. Yeah. Okay.
Mark, quickly, and I want to move on to that.
Okay, so delivering the service, I specialise in getting it to really awkward places. And I do off-grid solar relay masts, and I built my network to deliver it to the middle of Westwoods. There's 4 houses in the middle of Westwoods. And I didn't charge them a penny to get it connected.
But for the reason I said, there's not enough people in my valley
Four
who are
people.
willing to pay.
Yeah, so your challenge is Everly. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see how I can get on. Let's have a conversation. Great. Andrew, thanks for patiently listening to that. You might have any other answers to
Before I jump into my pitch, just it feels like a bit of a parallel life. We were Wessex Internet.
Yeah.
So just to say that tech is absolutely proven. You know, between 2012 and 2018, when my side of the business exited to leave it to the estate founders to take it on, we got to 2,000 subscribers, residential subscribers, 200 businesses on this technology, crossing the whole county and crossing into South Wiltshire and into South East Somerset. And we had a programme where we would put masts on hills, even with trailer masts, to get sector locations overlooking just a patch of land, really. And if it was within 5 kilometres, then just one of those dishes would do the job. If it was a bit further, then it was a bigger dish. The only problem that we would have is you could only get really about 70 customers on the service without it starting to slow down when the internet's busy, which is a sort of copper problem that we suffer from. But boy, did it solve problems. The difference between Wessex Internet and what you're doing is that they put fibre on the rural, through the ground to the different landowners and estates, and that's probably somewhere where you might be able to go forward. Anyway, GigaNet. So we exited Wessex Internet, and with that we upgraded our London Internet core. We built a fantastic portal, online portal, to allow people to connect up to businesses in particular, to connect up to City Fibre and Openreach network. So we partner with 15 of the tier 1 carriers in our London Internet exchange. And we went about thinking, where are we going to take this? And we had a think that, if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. So we decided to go out and try and raise a bit of funding. If you'd like to just move on to the next slide. And back, I don't know what you did through lockdown that was exciting, but come last, I think 17th of March last year, we all exited the office, and I had 2 jobs. It was have a go with a bunch of guys that had the expertise that we didn't have in the business to effectively manufacture a buyout of my existing business, which has been around since 2009. It's coming up, it's actually our 80th business birthday. We've been around supplying telecommunications and internet service for a while. And we created this brand GigaNet because we realized that just like we had with Wessex Internet, if you say what you're about, gigabit internet, it really does help with the overall message. So that's us last year, socially distanced at our party in the park business birthday, 22 people. Since April this year, we're now up to 47, on a trajectory to take us to 250. And one of these businesses in, which is going to, as you described yesterday on the call, which will swoop into towns and build out a full fibre infrastructure. So we're backed by Octopus, who you may have heard of as an energy business, and Fern, who are into solar, wind, and other infrastructure. So they're in the game of building full fibre infrastructure, and they're in it for the decades that it will actually last. And our plan is to connect market towns, city fibre in cities. Openreach up until recently didn't have a great deal of towns on their programme. So we're clustering groups of towns, and in Dorset, Wiltshire, Hampshire, West Sussex in particular, we've got a plan to pass 250,000 homes. And where we are in Devizes is pretty exciting. We've anyone Devizes here? I've got a feeling that you may have seen something this colour come through your door. We've had quite a few registrations of interest, which is fantastic. And our plan is to replace that copper network. In Devizes, there will be a percentage, don't know what it is, 5%, 25%, who will grumble about the copper, a distance from the cabinet. It slows down. It's not really copper, it's aluminium, junctions, breaks. Not only that, their internet service provider, who loves the big 4 or 5 if you add Virgin. So we are expecting to do something different. And one of the things that you can see about us, Openreach and City Fibre, we're selling over their networks. They are wholesale providers. So where Steve had actually said that they will be entering what are called the child exchanges of Devizes, the people who you need to buy the internet from are the ISPs. And yes, you could go with the big brand names, but you should also be able to choose GigaNet over the Openreach service. There's a new pricing model coming along in October, which, as long as we are fully committed to deliver just full fibre, means that we get some attractive pricing, which is going to help us be more consistent across our city fibre, where we're selling gigabit for £40 a month in Portsmouth and £37 a month for half a gig in Portsmouth. We haven't got our pricing yet for Devizes, but we'll be in that price bracket, hopefully around £40 a month for half a gig. And on Openreach, if we can be in the same area, that would be brilliant to try and have consistent pricing. And I'll let you jump to the next slide. So we know that you've also got to cut through. You've got to get take-up and by Fern. I mean, what a great thing to be able to offer free until October 22. So people next spring who can get a connection here in Devizes will say, well, I can just connect you and you in the street. Why not connect the whole street up so they can try us out? And then at the end of that period, October, decide whether they want to stay paying what we would think is a reasonable price per month, and then on rolling 30-day terms. So if stuff happens in their life, like they need to move house, we're not going to say, oh, you've got a few months left on your contract. We accept that things happen, but because we're not bound by our supplier to a period, then we should be able to be generous with our own terms. And we expect as well to be symmetrical. So that's the same up speed and down speed. So people who are working from home, gaming, streaming, it will be very very helpful. No price hikes as well. And what more would you want from somebody who's doing this? Somebody who likes to think they're reasonably good at it. We win awards. We've got a fantastic trust private rating right now. So just moving on to the next slide. Wow, you have a massive constituency. That is a lot of. It's the one colour that should be green, shouldn't it? So my view of what that you said 4%. I think it's 4%. I put 5 here. It's generous. Your options are. I really didn't know that you existed. You're there, local fibre microwave, but you know, Starlink is coming along. 4G, you proved that you can do something with that. There is established satellite people who are in the dip, you know, the likes of it, and the like to get a satellite connection, which is there. And you know, the medium term, this fantastic rollout for the rural area. Openreach, when they're doing this, they are a wholesale provider. We expect to be able to resell Giganet over those Openreach connections when they happen. I've got one last slide here, and that's really just to say you might see our vans around. There's a Devizes sign. This is what you get when you ask an engineer to take a picture. And that's where we're committed to. So we will have surveyed the whole patch, and even though we're building in Devizes, we will have surveyed the villages such that if there's enough interest, we will be connecting them, and we'll be using the PIA. It's good here. We've done quite a lot of work already.
Great, Andrew, thank you. So if Dominic Munns is still listening, Lavingtons are in there. So he's the Wiltshire councillor for that area. Great, guys. A few minutes. Some questions. Yeah. So
basically, my question is aimed at the Openreach guy.
Yeah.
My problem is slightly different to these guys. Basically, I farm on the fringes of Wiltshire, and Wiltshire Parish Council are crowing that all the residents have got superfast broadband, but they neglect to mention that the fringes of the village on the east end, where there are 5 rural businesses, haven't yet got superfast broadband. Now, Openreach engineers tell me I can get it. You ring them up, they say you can't get it, and then I got quoted an extortionate amount to get myself connected. Why should I be paying for it when residents in Wiltshire have already got it?
Okay, so thank you.
Sorry,
Steve, I'm going to come to you if I may in a moment. Just wrap up any last questions in the room. At the back, and then you say, yeah, at the back.
Yes, kind of along that really, to surmise, we want super fast, or certainly workable internet now, so to speak. I noticed that the council are putting in a lot of grants in relation to making sure that everybody in the towns get this broadband. Is there no way to kind of create, there are other companies out there that can see some kind of voucher scheme for those people that don't get broadband, a voucher scheme to make it viable for those that aren't able to reach it.
Exactly. I think that indeed is.
They're all available.
Yeah, we just need to make our money available for that.
Money, so
yeah.
Is there no way the council could help subsidise those people that don't get it and doing it with the towns who want to roll out, fibre to the boxes?
Yeah. I'll come to you in a second. Yes, sir.
Will all the notes and conversations of this meeting be published so that we can read it?
We're actually recording it. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. So we can get you a transcript or a recording. We're certainly going to follow up all of these individual points. Steve, do you want to respond to the gentleman about Wiltshire?
Yeah, I mean, again, we'd have to look into that on an individual basis. I don't know the specific circumstances, but again, if that can be compiled, we can make sure that it's fully looked into. I need to repeat myself really in terms of, if it's not a service issue that you're experiencing at the moment and further investment is required, then the options are it's either going to be picked up under a future programme, or you can go through Openreach or another commercial provider or look at what options are available, but ultimately as a commercial provider, if the costs exceed what's available through grants and vouchers, then that gap funding would need to be found from somewhere else if it's not forming part of our commercial programme.
We will follow that up with you, okay?
But yeah, I think because I told them farm, like farm, they had a couple of materials.
Okay, Ian.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to respond because I'm not sure I entirely heard what you were saying, but I think you were talking about the council focused on the towns or something.
Yes, the council.
No, absolutely not. The council programme that we were involved in was involved with an intervention area, which is defined as the area that is not commercially viable, i.e. therefore by definition not the towns. So our programme was about not the towns, and we have lifted it through that programme with BT Openreach and with GigaClear and BD UK. We have lifted that from 60% to 96%. We were never ever going to get to 100%. What we were trying to do was cover the maximum number of premises to get to at least super fast within the money available. Now, the point that was made here earlier by a gentleman about the strategy of why didn't you stay with superfast, build more cabinets, and you could have done more. But that was a BD UK decision to switch from the superfast architecture to the full fibre, because that was the view that was, in the end, what everybody was going to, and that's what the gigabit programme is about. So it was a decision not in our hands. In that.
Yeah, I think your point, though, there are obviously still some places which are unviable, and it should be possible with the money that's available clubbing together and using vouchers to come up with better solutions. That is exactly what I think we need to do. And I think that's the conversation we need to have with DCMS. We've got two minutes, so 30 seconds each, and then.
All quick question: could the government, if they enforce the ISPs to declare not only the download speed but the upload speed, create a commercial pressure then on Openreach, down the line, because everyone's competing, if someone will offer a better upload speed, to make it public, because everyone only speaks about download speed.
Yes.
You speak to ISP and they go, we don't guarantee that. So
sounds like there is a technical issue in some cases. There is a policy issue as well.
Yeah, there's an Openreach.
Yes, I understand
site
that.
to check what the theoretical maximum speed for
Theoretical.
you and your green cabinet, but no ISP could ever offer any more than that. And that's actually quite a good website to know how rubbish the connections are.
Yes, but it is theoretical and it doesn't.
You've got a knock off 20% from the
more on upload.
Yeah.
The download speed is more accurate.
No, it's the upload speed.
But I just wondered whether there's some.
That is, I think we should take that away. Exactly that suggestion. Yeah, I agree. Increasing is not there.
Danny, again, thank you for bringing this meeting together. But this is a strategic forum as opposed to a tactical local issue or a way to resolve individual problems. Because as I suggested or said earlier, the majority of people who have attended this meeting have issues today. One of the biggest problems I have is, in spite of a military background, I'm not a technical person. And you obviously are able to resolve some of your problems, but I did hear some mention of a village earlier where it took a considerable amount of effort and time to achieve anything. Now, we would like, I'm sure I speak for others, the opportunity to have a central point of contact, or somebody who, within either the council or within Openreach or BT, and I stick with BT as ISP because they can then throw it back over to Openreach and then play quickly, I hope. But a bit like PlusNet, they're another BT company, etc., etc. How the hell does an ordinary man, like the gentleman who's left now with beard and so on, deal with his community's problems where he doesn't have the wherewithal, the means, the knowledge, or anything? That is where our problem as a community-based structure is set, because we don't know who to turn to. You ask BT and they tell you one thing, you ask Openreach, they tell you something.
So thank you. So that's a great question and a challenge. It's one that I've been struggling with as well, trying to get my head around this. And in a sense, today was about bringing people together and trying to have a single conversation. Ultimately, there isn't going to be a single conversation. We don't want just one provider, because then we get bureaucracy and unaccountability. So there's going to be a diversity. There's lots of different technologies, and yes, it's going to be a bit messy. All I can promise, and I'm going to wrap the meeting up with this, is to say that, and I have only limited, it's Rebecca and me, a couple of others in the office. We can't do it. But what I would like to do is to keep a list of all of the communities and individual households, if necessary, who are chasing for a better solution, and to try and use what, additional leverage that I have to try and ensure that the providers deliver, and liaising with our colleagues here to see whether they have solutions. So I'd like to track all of the problems that we've heard about, and over the coming months, years, make sure, check in with you all and see, are we getting where we need to do? And if people are letting you down, all I can really do is make a fuss on your behalf. And that's what I want to do for anyone who needs it. I'm very, very grateful for everyone who's come today. You could have been doing other things. The bar is open, you can hear. Rival event going on. We can go and join them now. Very grateful to constituents who've come along and followed us online. Very grateful to you guys. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Steve, for putting up with this. You probably have to do this quite often, and we appreciate your good humour. Thanks, guys. And Ian, thank you very much indeed for speaking on behalf of the council. Andrew, if you're still with us, very much appreciate your time and input, and I'll be picking up some of those policy suggestions with you. So we'll stop there. If anyone's able to hang around and talk to people, then great. But as I've said, please do let Rebecca and me know directly through my MP email address what your issues are, and we'll keep a log of all of them and pursue them over time. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.